So, I'm going to talk a little bit about pinata making again, and I don't think I have the camera pointed at me.
I think it's at me and laundry.
Yeah. And James will talk about this movie because he knows more about the writer and stuff. So, The Aspirin Papers, based on the novella. By Henry James.
See?
So.
I've never read this stuff. I got to admit, it's one of those things. I've got pretty well everything Henry James ever wrote, and I haven't gone through more than 10 pages of anything.
Really? So you don't like his stuff and his writing something good, or?
Well, it's kind of hard to read. I've got to admit now. I've got an English degree. The sentences tend to be long and fairly convoluted. Someone once told me way back when I used to work on the Muirs, and that was in the student newspaper. They I think they're trying to congratulate me. They said you write like Henry James. So I wasn't sure. I was going, well, okay.
What do you say to that, right?
But I do write. And you've seen how I write in longer sentences,
yes.
Right?
Yeah, they're incredibly long. Yeah. So there was, one time I read the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe,
right.
And
died 1852, so that's a while back, right? You were reading it in 2010, as I recall, in Winnipeg, right?
Yeah, and I read a whole bunch of Margaret Atwood books that summer too. But anyway, so I was reading the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe, and
there's not a lot of them. It would have been
it's
in one
pretty
volume.
thick.
It's thick, but it was a lot of short stories and novellas and things like that.
Essays. But what I liked the most, like I had an appreciation for Edgar Allan Poe, or I wouldn't have bothered to read the complete works. But anyway, I just kind of thought, well, it's like eating instant food or something. It's satisfying, but it's not really going to amount to anything or whatever. It's something, yeah. So I hadn't really
grasp the full, like you got through the whole book.
Oh yeah, but
there you go, which is now you know Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
Right.
So I hadn't really thought seriously, I suppose, about Edgar Allan Poe. I just thought, well, I enjoy the stuff, and it's like, like how people enjoy reading Stephen King or whatever. Now, reading the complete works, I got a sense of, okay, well, he's doing some stuff for public consumption. He's got to pay the bills.
Yeah.
I
don't think he paid them very well, but I think he was like maybe an alcoholic and or opium addict, something like that. I can't remember.
But then when I read the essays, I was like, oh my gosh, he's worth reading, and so once you from a literary standpoint, you might be looking, you might not take Edgar Allan Poe seriously, as I didn't. You're reading whatever. I don't know. What's the one about well, I don't want to give away any of the stories in case they haven't.
Well, I mean, some of the titles follow The House of Usher, The Mask of the Red Death.
Well, I don't know titles. I'd have to go through the story. I don't remember titles.
Well,
titles
the Murders on the Morgue were about the. Well, I can't
don't give
tell
away
you
the
what
stories. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
because
it was
you
where
start
the
talking
corpse
about.
was stuffed.
Don't tell. Okay, that happens right away.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Okay.
Right. I mean,
yeah.
That's one of the mysterious things. So it's a murder mystery, and but it's also kind of like a horror story. So.
Anyway, but yeah, reading the essays and it was amazing what he did. There was this one essay in particular, and I can't remember the name of it, but most of the reading was actually in the footnotes. Yes,
that's hilarious.
It was awesome. So I guess you're just going to have to read the complete works to find it, because
that's the way to read a person, so you get a sense of what's going on.
Yeah.
And if a person has time, and if they're worth it, once you ascertain whether they're worth it, it might do with rereading and rereading. So the fact that I don't like Henry James isn't really a reflection on him, particularly when you've got that kind of convolution, because you have to really concentrate on stuff. And I'm not competent to make a judgment on it. I could really, I think, only be competent to make something like a semi-definitive judgment if I'd read basically all the stuff he'd ever written. See, like competent or maybe semi-competent, because you see the other thing is why I say semi-competent is you have to be reading the whole oeuvre of English literature, right?
You're right.
And
yes.
to see where a person fits into context.
Yes.
But it really is world literature.
Mm-hmm.
You have to see, at least in translation,
yes,
what's
it's so
happening
important. I mean, most people, we're taught to specialize in certain things, and the whole university system actually, exactly,
More
it
and more
funnels you
about less and less, as
and
you
it puts
once
the
said.
blinders on, so you're directed in one direction, right? And everything else is cut out. And but unless you look at everything, you don't really have a grasp of the meaning of anything.
So you can't, you can't, particularly when it comes to assessments of quality. You'll get a lot of people in the arts saying, like, oh, that's just a value judgment. And yet, when they're looking at a actual corpus that they study in the history of art or the history of poetry or so on and so forth, they're making judgments by excluding people. And all they're really saying is, your judgment doesn't count, ours does, right?
Yes.
And
and it's actually
you'll
what
get
it
guys
is.
who specialize in stuff. They'll say, gosh darn it, this is the best poet ever going. Like this happens with Sylvia Plath and things like that. She didn't write enough, really, for a person to make that kind of assessment.
Yeah, that's too bad.
I know, she killed herself and stuff like that. So.
Anyway, no, going back to the arts, though, that kind of attitude really comes from a more communist sort of driven
I hadn't thought
approach.
about that.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that to offend anybody who has socialist values, because I myself do, and I think that we need a socialist revolution of the mind, but not a physical revolution. They are violent, and they tend to be to get nowhere. They're just they're an outburst that doesn't
what
end
happens
up
is the
achieving anything.
counter-revolution sets in.
Yeah.
And sometimes it still has revolutionary aspects or forward-looking or going aspects, like Napoleon. He was a reaction, right?
Yeah.
And then there was a reaction to Napoleon that set in 1815. So he kind of came to power effectively by 1798, I believe
Hot
it
lemon
was. He
and
was trying to invade Egypt. So, for about 17 years, he was kind of in the seat of power, and then a huge reaction set in 1815, and it went on in France. It really wasn't upset until 1848, and that didn't really work, and what really wasn't upset until 1870, and that really didn't work. And
no, but
like
if
that.
you think about it, the communist revolutions that have taken place have been dictatorships, and you can't get anywhere with that. You get the opinion of one person and leading everybody. I mean, that's ridiculous. You're not going to get ahead. Your society is not going to improve if you have one person setting the shots for everybody. It needs to be a whole bunch of people coming together and just bouncing ideas off of each other, so that and information needs to be open and available so that people can pull to try to come up with something greater and work together to come up with something greater for everybody.
Yeah,
so
even the nastiest stuff has to be available, like Mein Kampf. People have to be able to read it in order to know what's involved.
You have to know where that came from,
there should
where
be,
everything
I think
came from.
something like censorship is people shouldn't be allowed to publish it and make approving statements about it, and maybe should be illegal to publish it without having a few countervailing arguments or a few negative comments on it. But the stuff has to be published. Everything has to be published.
Oh, well, like
Except
perhaps it
for
should be
people's,
like you should
deaths,
read
like
read it with some other things,
Oh,
so
that's the only way to read
so
stuff.
Sure. So if you're going to look at reading that, you might want to read a collection of other things with so that you can put it into context.
Yeah, one of the most important things is just to look what happened with it. Like the Bible says, and you can judge Christians by this: by their fruits ye shall know them. But it applies especially to Christians, because that was, that was said in the New Testament. It's probably maybe not the best translation, but I swear you can apply it to any belief system. Belief systems tend to have had at some point or another a practical application in real life. And then what you do is you look at how that practical application or those practical applications turned out. And communism, after 1989, as practiced in the Soviet Union, it deserved to be on the dustbin of history. And that, I think, is maybe a Marxist formulation. You could say something like capitalism belongs in the dust heap of history or something like that.
And, well, a lot of people have. I've talked to a lot of right-wingers that have a problem
There's
with
a lot of them
government.
around here, yeah.
And they feel that government is too, communist in their approach with dealing with the public and public needs and desires and whatever. And in some respects, that does happen. So you were talking to the guys at City Hall about the recycling program before it took place. And the guy in charge said, well, it's going to happen whether they like it or not, kind of thing, with the public approval, right?
So
and it's like, what? You're working for the public, and you're going to push it through whether the public wants it or not?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Like, how is that, right? You're supposed to be working for the public, not setting the rules for the public. And so, I mean, whether or not I approve of something. I remember years ago I was working as a integrated pest management technician, and I had an awesome supervisor, and he was wanting to find out whether they could stop doing dandelion control. So the city was paying a huge amount of money to a contractor to do dandelion control. And if I remember correctly, like, this wasn't that big a city. I think the contract was $50,000 every summer to do the dandelion control. It was just sprayed once, and that's a lot of money for one contractor. Right? Well, and the public was complaining about the timing of the application and this and that, and it's like, well, you got to try to fit it in somewhere. If you don't have any contractors that are willing to,
cause a problem.
Well, if you don't have the contractors that are willing to do it at a specific time, or you don't write it in the contractors that this will be sprayed at that time, they will do. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, but what he was saying to me. Now, I'm not going to talk about the outcome or anything like that, but he was asking me, well, this is where it stands on. Like, they had put out a thing with the taxes to ask everybody, well, do you want this to occur or not? So then they sent back the forms, and he was tallying up the numbers, and he said, well, this is where it stands right now. This is this is what the public wants, right? This is what the taxpayer wants. And I said, well, one thing to consider is you're only giving that out to the taxpayers. You have in the city, how many renters do you have, and how many people are paying the taxes but they're actually living in Winnipeg or somewhere,
or Chicago,
or who knows, right? So are you really working for the citizens of this city when you're sending it out in that fashion? So then he considered that and changed things up a bit. But anyway, so then the results came back, and he said, well, this is where it is. And I said, well, if that's what the public wants, then that's what we have to do. And it wasn't the desire, it wasn't the outcome that I wanted, but that's what the public wanted, and he knew it, I'm an honest person, and I'm not going to say, well, this isn't what we wanted, and we're going to push it through anyway. No, if you're working for the public, if you're working as a government employee, you're accountable to the public. You do what the public wants, whether you don't want to do it or not, and that's the thing. So anyway, but that's not how it works a lot of the time, and I understand that. We have recycling bins now, and I was talking to somebody about they closed down the YMCA pool down by the library.
Is that what they've done?
Yeah, they have.
You
And
heard about it then?
the one.
We didn't know if they're doing renovations or just closing it down. So they're
No.
going to be knocking it down or trying to sell it.
So I don't know what's going to happen. It's all rumor right now. So I was talking to one woman, and I really appreciated her comments. I was having a discussion with a woman, and she was really amusing. And anyway, so I asked her about what the story with that was, and had she heard anything, and she was like, well, the rumor has it that they're tearing it down, and what they wanted us to do is to all head over to the fancy building on the west side. And
I was going to say there was going to be
so
something
that's what they
on
were
the
hoping
west
for.
side.
And she said, but as it turns out, most of us are just going to the Fritzik. But you know what they want to do with the Fritzik, because they've been trying
wanted
to
to
tear
get
it
rid of the
down
pool.
years ago.
Yeah.
So so far, it's not working out so that they can tear it down, because they wanted to drive people from getting their physical activity needs from the downtown core way out to the west side. So they wanted people to bus out to go get and rather than walk
Bus
to
out
where
or
they.
drive out,
And anyway,
but yeah.
so
I think the Fritzik gets more use than they are suggesting.
Mm.
I think those
It's
troops
a
of
small
kids
pool.
we see
If
going
they
down
put-
through this neighborhood are, around this time of year, they're going down to learn swimming down there.
Yeah.
Am I making it up?
if they put in a larger pool down in the core where it's needed, because sometimes I would go to the Fritzik in the morning and it was full, and I was like, how am I going to be able to swim laps in here when there's just so many people, and you swim at different rates, different speeds, and how can you possibly, right? So anyway, but that's what they're trying to do, and they're not renovating the Fritzik to meet the needs of the public. We need a bigger pool downtown, and they're not giving it to us.
Well, they're making
trying to
it
drive
worse,
us out.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, they took away one. We had two pools downtown, right near each other, and now they took one away. So now we have one, and it's too small.
And it's
And
one that they've been wanting.
they've been wanting to tear it down.
working to get rid of it for decades,
And if
literally
they,
decades.
honestly, if they decide to renovate, and they will find some way to make it even less desirable. The renovations will be less desirable. Like
they
it's
do
like our
stuff
public
like that.
library.
Mhm.
I've talked to people. People have come up to me recently about the different things that they've done with the library, and they said, "Where has our library gone? Where has our library gone? It's not ours anymore.
It's in the toilet. Yeah.
They haven't
It is kind
renovated
of ours.
it for us.
It's
They
kind of
haven't-
like swishing around in the toilet.
Mm.
But, yeah.
Anyway, but there's a kind of interesting love scene. Yeah, some kissing, some suggestion between two men and a woman in there. But besides that, yeah. And my heart pinata is ready for its last layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this garlic bread paper. So I'm going to put the stuff on this end to glue down like such. And then, if I wanted to do a robot looking, and this might be interesting, right? I might want to make something that looks like steel, right? And then I could use that and just leave it, and then put on maybe some decorations, say that look like bolts or something like that, so it looks like a robot, right? I might want to do that with this garlic bread paper.
I was thinking you were going to put glitter on it.
I could.
A glitter robot, a
I
70s
could.
robot.
I could put whatever I wanted on the outside, but as it turns out, I'm just using this just to get rid of it, because I have a lot of garlic bread paper, because James was really interested in garlic bread there for a while, this stuff. And I don't like to throw anything out. I don't really believe in recycling unless you can't find a use for it at all.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that people are conscious about the waste that they collect. And
There's no.
this is a good way to be aware of it. If you just stuff it in a tub, whether it's a garbage container or a recycling container that empties every week, you don't notice how much you're actually contributing to the problem, right? So
The other thing is about recycling programs is there's no guarantee
that they're actually recycling
doing
at all.
what they claim to do,
Mhm.
claim to be doing. So I can recall working for a public enterprise, we're not going to name what it was, in the 80s. I think they started to have 2 garbage containers. I used to do janitorial. And so one was for recycling, paper recycling, right? And I'm going, well, this is a little bit extra work for me because I'd have to do 2 dumps and I'd have to take 2 garbage cans along, right? Mm-hmm. That was a real challenge because I'd handle them like they were on wheels. I'd handle them like big soccer balls. And that was a bit of a challenge to keep them from tipping over, right? Mm-hmm. That's the big. I can remember one woman at work. She saw me picking the garbage. That was the first thing I'd do a day, and there'd be a little bit of overlap where the people are ending their office hours. She was an athlete, and like Lethbridge wide honored basketball player. So she said, "Oh, that's easy." I'd already picked up garbage at the other end of the building.
Did she hurt her foot?
No, but she kind of bit into my schedule.
Oh, you had to pick it all up again.
There was stuff all over. She was apologizing. She's a very nice person, you know. It's just, she thought she'd show me a thing.
Okay, story, get to the point.
Anyway, what was I talking about? That was
recycling, putting paper in one bin and
so what would happen is I'd help out with the recycling because people didn't get it quite right. You know, there was paper garbage and the regular garbage. So I'd be sorting it by hand. That's before it was standard issue in this large public institution to have gloves, latex gloves, right? So I was doing this, kind of fishing around in garbages for the paper with my bare hands. And I was spending more and more time doing that, right? And going, you know, I already was giving some, maybe a lot of, was it a lot sometimes? A free overtime?
Yes.
Lots of free overtime. And it ended up being more and more free overtime because ultimately I'm going, Jesus, there's, you know, hardly anyone's doing recycling, you know? Mm-hmm. They just got lax, you know? I thought it was like a New Year's resolution for the average person. How long does the average New Year's resolution last? Probably studies have been done. A week? What do you think?
Yeah.
Most people, I think, would make it a week. Might be a month. Anyway, I'm sorting more and more and more stuff, spending more and more time because, you know, it's not, you kind of have to go through stuff. It's not just, oh, here's some stuff, plonk, away we go. Then, after months and months of doing this, someone just said to me casually, you know, I think they saw me doing this stuff. They said, you know, they got rid of that program. A long time ago. And, you know,
so were just, the bins were there, but they were just garbage bins anyway.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, if you get rid of the program, you take those little bins or waste baskets away. And you actually tell your janitorial people, I kind of care about the environment, you know. I thought it was a great program, and it was, you know. Yeah, so you recycle at source, kind of like you have people actually do that recycling, right? Mm-hmm. It's because it gets messy once it starts getting mixed up with regular garbage. It gets messier and messier as it goes on the line. Anyway, that was hilarious. That's bureaucracy in action, and you notice how kind I am being by not singling out the offending